On a dark country road, a war-scarred single father stops to help a stranded mom and her little boy. She looks broke, but what he doesn't know is she's hiding a billion-dollar secret. As sparks of hope flicker, the town welcomes her with open arms until a child whispers the words that change everything. "Mommy says you're my daddy." In one night, rumors explode. His honor is questioned, her empire is on the line, and a community is torn apart by lies, prejudice, and power. But when the truth collides with scandal, one question remains. Will this veteran and this mother find real love? Or will the secrets that brought them together tear their family apart forever? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Thunder crackled across the dark Missouri sky as Cal Whitaker squinted through his windshield wipers. The rain came down in heavy sheets, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead on the winding county road. His old pickup truck's headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the wet asphalt. It had been a long day at the garage, and his muscles ached from replacing a transmission. All he wanted was to get home to Rosie, but something caught his eye through the downpour. Hazard lights blinking weakly on the shoulder of the road. Cal slowed his truck, years of military training making him naturally alert. Through the rain, he could make out a silver sedan with a flat tire. A woman in a rain-soaked jacket stood protectively over a small boy, trying to shield him from the worst of the storm. He pulled over, switching on his own hazard lights. "Stay here," he told himself firmly, reaching for his heavy work flashlight. The rain immediately soaked through his canvas jacket as he stepped out. "Need some help?" he called out, keeping his voice gentle to avoid startling them. The woman turned, relief visible on her face despite the rain. "Oh, thank goodness. We hit something in the road and—" She gestured helplessly at the flat tire. "I'm Cal Whitaker," he said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I'm a mechanic in town. Let me take a look." The woman nodded gratefully. "I'm Elena, and this is Tomas." The boy, who couldn't have been more than 7, pressed closer to his mother's side. Cal crouched down to examine the tire, his flashlight beam revealing a nasty gash in the rubber. "Looks like you found yourself a pretty mean pothole," he said, offering Tomas a kind smile. "Don't worry, we'll get you fixed up." He was just retrieving the jack from his truck when another vehicle's headlights approached. A lifted pickup truck slowed as it passed, and 2 men leaned out the windows. "Hey lady, you lost?" one called out with a sneer. "The border's that way." They laughed, and Cal's jaw tightened as he heard more slurs following their initial taunt. Without hesitation, Cal straightened to his full height, positioning himself between Elena's family and the truck. "Move along," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had served him well as a combat medic. "These folks are with me." The driver revved his engine threateningly, but Cal didn't flinch. He'd faced worse than small-town bullies in his time. After a tense moment, they peeled away with a spray of gravel, their laughter fading into the storm. Elena had pulled Tomas close, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Cal nodded, already turning back to the tire. "Let's get you out of this rain." He worked efficiently, muscles moving with practiced ease as he changed the flat. The storm continued its assault, but he barely noticed the cold water running down his neck. While he worked, he kept up a gentle conversation with Tomas, who gradually emerged from behind his mother. "You like trucks?" Cal asked, noticing the boy's interest in his toolbox. Tomas nodded shyly. "I have a collection," he said softly. "Yeah? My daughter Rosie used to collect them too. Now she's more interested in learning how to fix the real ones." Cal tightened the last lug nut and stood, his knees protesting the movement. Elena reached for her purse, but Cal held up a hand. "No charge, but that tire won't get you far. Town's just a few miles ahead. I know a place where you can wait out the storm, get a proper replacement in the morning." Relief flooded Elena's face. "That's very kind of you, but we couldn't impose." "It's no imposition," Cal assured her, already helping them gather their things. "Duke's Diner has the best coffee in 3 counties, and he always keeps the lights on late." Thunder boomed overhead, making Tomas jump. Cal saw Elena hesitate, looking at their car, then at the threatening sky. "Follow me," he said simply. "I'll make sure you get there safe." They pulled onto the road, Cal's truck leading the way through the storm. In his rearview mirror, he could see Elena's headlights, following steadily. Something about her composure in the face of both the breakdown and those men's hatred had impressed him. She reminded him of his late wife Sarah, the same quiet strength, the same fierce protection of her child. The rain was still coming down in buckets when they reached the familiar glow of Duke's diner. Cal parked close to the entrance, grabbed his umbrella, and helped Elena and Tomas inside. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and warm air wrapped around them like a blanket. "Cal!" Duke called from behind the counter. "Caught in the storm, huh?" His eyes took in their soaked appearance with concern. "Had some trouble on the county road," Cal explained. "Think we could get some hot chocolate for the young man here?" Elena started to object, but Duke was already moving. "Coming right up. And coffee for the grown-ups, I bet. Get yourselves settled. I just pulled a fresh apple pie from the oven." As they slid into a booth, Elena turned to Cal, her dark eyes serious. "I don't know how to thank you. Not just for the tire, but for before. Those men." "No thanks needed," Cal said firmly. "Nobody deserves that kind of treatment. Not here, not anywhere." Tomas had pressed himself against his mother's side, his small face still showing traces of fear from their roadside encounter. Cal recognized that look. He'd seen it too many times overseas. On the faces of children, caught in situations they shouldn't have to face. Duke arrived with their drinks, setting a massive mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream in front of Tomas. The boy's eyes widened, and a small smile finally broke through his worry. "The storm should pass by morning," Cal said, watching Elena's hands wrap gratefully around her coffee mug. "I can help you get a proper tire then. My garage isn't far." Elena nodded, still looking shaken but more composed in the diner's warm light. "You've already done so much." "It's what neighbors do," Cal said simply, though he knew they were strangers passing through. Something about helping them felt right, felt like the kind of thing Sarah would have wanted him to do. The rain drummed against the diner's windows, but inside, surrounded by the smell of coffee and pie, the worst of the night's darkness seemed to fade away. Duke had just served a second round of coffee when the diner's bell chimed again. Rosie Whitaker burst in, her dark hair damp from the rain, backpack clutched to her chest. "Dad, I saw your truck outside and—" She stopped, taking in the scene before her. Her father sat across from a woman and young boy she'd never seen before, their clothes still showing signs of the storm. "Rosie," Cal said warmly, "come meet Elena and Tomas. They had some car trouble on the county road." Rosie slid into the booth next to her father, her observant eyes taking in every detail. Elena's clothes were simple but well-made, and despite being rain-soaked, her bearing suggested someone used to carrying herself with grace. "Hi," Rosie said, directing a friendly smile at Tomas. "I'm Rosie. Do you like pie?" "Duke makes the best apple pie in Missouri." Tomas glanced up at his mother for permission before nodding shyly. "I like apple pie," he whispered. "Duke," Cal called, "could we get another slice over here?" "Coming right up," Duke replied, already reaching for a clean plate. He brought over not just pie for Tomas, but an extra slice for Rosie, too. "On the house," he said gruffly, though his eyes were kind. "Oh, please," Elena protested. "You've all been too generous already. At least let me pay for—" "Ma'am," Duke interrupted. "Any friends of Cal's are friends of mine. Besides, can't send a kid to bed without dessert on a night like this." Thunder crashed outside as if emphasizing his point, making Tomas jump slightly. Elena wrapped an arm around him, and Cal noticed how protectively she held her son, how her own meal remained mostly untouched while she made sure Tomas ate. "We're traveling light," Elena explained, catching Cal's concerned look. "Just what fits in our suitcases. We needed a fresh start." She smiled, but there was something careful in her expression, something that made Rosie tilt her head thoughtfully. "Where are you headed?" Rosie asked, fork poised over her pie. "West," Elena said vaguely. "We're taking our time, seeing the country." She glanced down at Tomas, who was focused entirely on his dessert. "It's been an adventure, hasn't it, mijo?" Tomas nodded, whipped cream dotting his nose. "We saw the biggest ball of twine," he announced, seeming to forget his earlier shyness. Cal smiled, remembering road trips with Sarah and a much younger Rosie. "That's up in Kansas, isn't it? Quite a sight." "You've been there?" Tomas asked eagerly. "Sure have. Rosie was about your age. Remember that trip, sweetheart? Dad made us stop at every weird roadside attraction between here and Colorado," Rosie told Tomas, rolling her eyes but smiling. "The twine ball, The giant prairie dog statue. The underground salt museum. The underground what? Tomas's eyes went wide. While Rosie described their adventures to an enthralled Tomas, Cal studied Elena. There was something in the way she held herself, a hint of strain around her eyes despite her smile. When she reached for her coffee cup, he noticed her hands weren't work-roughened like most travelers who claim to be broke. About your car, Cal said quietly while the kids chatted. I've got a garage in town. First thing tomorrow, I can put on a proper tire. Check everything else while I'm at it. No charge, he added, seeing her start to protest again. Mr. Whitaker, Cal, he corrected gently. Cal, Elena amended. You've already done so much. Those men on the road, and now this. I can't accept more charity. It's not charity, Cal said firmly. It's just being neighborly. Besides, he gestured to where Tomas was giggling at something Rosie had said. Looks like these two are getting along just fine. Elena's eyes softened as she watched their children interact. He hasn't laughed like that in weeks, she admitted quietly. Duke approached their table again, coffee pot in hand. Storm's not letting up anytime soon, he observed. You folks got a place to stay? We'll find something, Elena said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Got 2 rooms above the diner, Duke said casually. Nothing fancy, but they're clean and dry. One's got twin beds that'd suit you and your boy just fine. Relief flickered across Elena's face before she controlled her expression. That's very kind, but Mama, Tomas interrupted, tugging at her sleeve. I'm tired. Elena's resistance crumbled at her son's pleading look. How much for the room? She asked Duke. $30, Duke said, naming a price Cal knew was well below his usual rate. Includes breakfast. Then we accept, Elena said with quiet dignity. Thank you. While Duke went to get the key, Rosie helped Tomas gather the few belongings they'd brought in from the car. Cal noticed there wasn't much, just 2 modest suitcases and a backpack with what looked like school supplies. The stairs are around back, Duke explained, returning with an old brass key. Rooms at the top, end of the hall. Got a good view of Main Street. Not that you can see much in this weather. Elena shouldered her bag, then reached for Tomas's hand. Thank you all, truly. You've shown such kindness to strangers. Get some rest, Cal said. I'll look at your car first thing tomorrow. They watched as Duke led Elena and Tomas through the back door, holding an umbrella over them as they dashed to the stairs. Through the diner's windows, they could see the warm glow of lights coming on in the upper room. Dad, Rosie said thoughtfully once Elena and Tomas were out of earshot. There's something different about them. Elena doesn't seem. Her clothes. The way she talks. I noticed, Cal agreed. But whatever their story is, they needed help tonight. That's all that matters. Rosie nodded, but Cal could see her mind working. She'd inherited her mother's sharp instincts about people. Can I help at the garage tomorrow? She asked. I promised I'd show Tomas my toy truck collection anyway. Sure, sweetheart. Cal smiled, knowing his daughter's offer came from both curiosity and genuine concern for their new acquaintances. Now, let's head home before this storm gets worse. Above the diner, Elena stood at the window of their small room, watching lightning illuminate the quiet town. Behind her, Tomas had already fallen asleep in one of the twin beds, his breathing deep and peaceful. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, considering the strange turn their journey had taken. The kindness of strangers, real kindness, not the polished corporate variety she was used to, had caught her off guard. Especially Cal Whitaker, with his quiet strength and genuine concern. Another flash of lightning revealed the name painted on the building across the street. Whitaker, Friends Auto Repair. Elena smiled slightly, thinking of how Cal had stood up to those men, how he'd refused payment for helping them. People like that were rare in her world. Thunder rolled again, but this time, Tomas didn't stir. He was finally sleeping soundly, something he hadn't done since they'd left home. Elena watched him for a moment, then turned back to the storm-swept street below, where the neon sign of Duke's Diner cast a warm glow through the rain. The morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Cal unlocked his garage. The storm had passed, leaving puddles that reflected the pale sky. He'd promised Elena he'd look at her car first thing, and Cal Whitaker never broke his word. The familiar smell of oil and metal greeted him as he flipped on the lights. His tools hung in neat rows on the wall, each one in its designated spot. The garage wasn't fancy, but it was clean and organized, just the way he liked it. Elena's silver sedan sat in the center bay, still showing spots from the rain. Cal popped the hood and began his inspection, his practiced hands moving with purpose. Beyond the flat tire they'd changed last night, he wanted to make sure everything else was running smooth. The bell above the side door jingled, and Rosie walked in carrying 2 paper bags and a drink carrier from Duke's. "Brought breakfast," she announced, setting everything down on his workbench. "Duke made extra hash browns." "Thanks, sweetheart." Cal wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Elena and Tomas should be here soon." Right on cue, the bell chimed again. Elena entered with Tomas holding her hand. The boy's eyes went wide at the sight of all the tools and equipment. "Good morning," Elena said, looking more put together than someone who'd spent the night in a small-town inn should. Even in simple jeans and a white blouse, there was something elegant about her that Cal hadn't noticed in the dark and rain. "Breakfast," Rosie offered, already pulling out wrapped sandwiches. They gathered around the workbench, the morning sun streaming through the high windows. Tomas sat on a clean shop stool, swinging his legs as he ate. "The tire's an easy fix," Cal explained between bites. "But your timing belt's showing wear. Might want to think about replacing it soon." Elena nodded, reaching for her coffee. "I trust your judgment, Mr. Whitaker, whatever you think is best." "Call me Cal," he said. Mr. Whitaker was my father. Tomas had wandered over to a shelf of old hubcaps Cal had collected over the years, each one polished to a shine. "Mama, look, they're like mirrors." "Careful, Mijo," Elena cautioned, then caught herself. A slight tension crossed her face. Cal noticed, but didn't comment. He'd been around enough to know when someone was trying to keep a low profile. "Those are from all kinds of different cars," Rosie explained to Tomas. "Dad lets me help polish them sometimes." While the kids chatted, Cal went back to work on the car. Elena stayed close, watching with genuine interest as he explained what he was doing. She asked intelligent questions that showed she wasn't completely unfamiliar with mechanics. "My father insisted I learn the basics," she said. "He said Rivera women shouldn't depend on—" She stopped abruptly, her coffee cup freezing halfway to her lips. Cal's hand stilled on the wrench. Rivera. The name clicked into place. He'd seen it just last week in the business section of the newspaper. Rosie always insisted he read to stay informed about the world. Elena Rivera, the billionaire philanthropist who'd made headlines for her innovative approach to charitable giving. The photo in the paper hadn't done her justice, but it was definitely her. Their eyes met. In that moment of recognition, Elena's shoulders tensed, ready for the usual reaction her name triggered. But Cal just gave a small nod and went back to working on the timing belt. "Hand me that socket wrench?" he asked casually, as if nothing had changed. Relief washed over her face. She picked up the correct tool without hesitation and passed it to him. "You know your way around an engine," he observed. "Like I said," my father insisted. A genuine smile touched her lips. "He built his first company from a small garage, not much different from this one. He never wanted me to forget where we came from." Smart man. Yes, he was. She took a deep breath. "Look, about who I am." "It's your business," Cal said simply. "Though I'm guessing you're not really broke." A soft laugh escaped her. "No, I'm traveling incognito, trying to see firsthand how the money from my foundation is actually being used in small towns, whether it's really helping people or just looking good on paper." From across the garage, the sound of metal clattering made them both turn. Duke stood in the doorway, a new box of air filters in his hands and his eyebrows somewhere near his hairline. "Well, I'll be damned," Duke muttered, just loud enough to hear. His eyes darted from Elena to Cal and back again. Cal shot his friend a warning look. Duke might be gruff, but he was loyal to a fault. The subtle shake of Cal's head was all it took. Duke's expression smoothed over into his usual scowl. "Brought those filters you ordered?" Duke announced at normal volume, deliberately casual. "Need help installing them?" "Thanks, Duke," Cal said meaningfully, knowing his friend understood it was for more than just the filters. Rosie and Tomas were still absorbed in the hubcap collection, oblivious to the quiet revelation that had just occurred. Elena watched them for a moment, then turned back to Cal. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. Not many people." She trailed off, but Cal understood. Not many people would treat her the same after learning who she was. Not many would keep her secret without asking for something in return. Not many would see past the billions to the person trying to do some good in the world. "Your car should be ready in about an hour," Cal said, keeping his voice matter-of-fact. "Might want to grab some more coffee from Duke's while you wait." Duke took his cue. "Best coffee in 3 counties," he announced. Though that ain't saying much for the other two. His grumbling was perfectly normal, perfectly ordinary, exactly what Elena seemed to need. The afternoon sun streamed through the garage's windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Elena stood near Cal's workbench, her elegant posture a stark contrast to the industrial setting. She'd changed into simple jeans and a white blouse, but there was no hiding her natural grace. "Mr. Whitaker," she began, then smiled. "Cal, I've been thinking about your garage and the work you do here." Cal wiped his hands on a shop rag, giving her his full attention. "What about it?" "I see potential here, not just for car repairs, but for something bigger." Elena's eyes lit up as she spoke. "What if we could turn this into a training center for veterans? Give them a chance to learn a trade, rebuild their lives?" Cal's breath caught. He dreamed of something like this, but never had the means. That's quite an idea. "My foundation specializes in community development grants," Elena continued. "We could expand the garage, add training facilities, provide tools and equipment." She pulled out a folder from her bag. "I've drafted a preliminary proposal." Rosie, who had been quietly organizing invoices at the front desk, moved closer to listen. Elena laid out papers on the clean corner of Cal's workbench. The grant would be structured as a partnership. Initial funding of $250, zero for expansion and equipment. Another, $500, zero in operating costs over 3 years. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. If the program hits its benchmarks, training veterans, job placement rates, the equity stake would be worth over $1 million. Cal's hands trembled slightly as he looked at the figures. That's a lot of money." "Dad," Rosie spoke up, her voice soft but determined. "This is what you've always wanted, to help other vets the way you helped yourself." Cal glanced at his daughter, seeing the earnest hope in her eyes. She was right. How many times had he wished he could do more for the veterans who came through his shop, looking for work or just a friendly face who understood? "The paperwork's complicated," Elena admitted. "Technically, you'd be a millionaire on paper if everything succeeds. But that's not what matters, is it?" She gestured around the garage. "What matters is what we could build here. A place where veterans can heal through purpose, just like you did." Cal ran a hand through his gray-streaked hair. The possibility was overwhelming, but exciting. He looked at the tools on his wall, imagining them in the hands of young veterans learning to rebuild their lives. "Could I think about it?" he asked. "Show these papers to my lawyer?" Elena nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Later that afternoon, they gathered at Duke's diner. The lunch rush had ended, leaving the place quiet except for the soft clink of coffee cups and the hum of the ceiling fans. Cal and Elena sat in a corner booth, going through the paperwork one more time. Rosie watched from her perch at the counter, hope blooming in her chest. She hadn't seen her father this energized in years. "Initial here," Elena pointed, her finger marking each spot requiring a signature. "And here. This is just preliminary approval. We'll need full contracts drawn up by the lawyers." Cal's pen moved steadily across the papers. Each signature felt like opening a door to something new, something bigger than himself. Duke appeared at their table, coffee pot in hand. He topped off their cups, his expression unreadable as he watched Cal sign. "Well," Cal said, placing the pen down. "That's done." Elena gathered the papers carefully. "I'll have my office process these right away. We can start planning the expansion next week." As Elena excused herself to make some calls, Duke settled into her vacant seat. He waited until she was out of earshot before speaking. "You sure about this, old friend?" Cal met his buddy's concerned gaze. "It's a chance to make a difference, Duke. Real difference." Duke's weathered face creased with worry. "Money changes things, Cal. Especially this kind of money. Even on paper, being a millionaire draws attention you might not want." "I'm not doing it for the money," Cal said firmly. "Nobody ever does." Duke stood up, adjusting his apron. "Just remember, wealth always brings trouble. Sometimes more trouble than it's worth." Cal watched his friend return to the counter, considering his words. Through the diner's window, he could see Elena pacing on the sidewalk, phone to her ear, already setting things in motion. Rosie caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up, her smile bright with possibility. Maybe Duke was right about money bringing trouble, but looking at his daughter's hopeful face, Cal couldn't help feeling that some things were worth the risk. The evening sky had faded to deep purple over Willow Creek when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up outside Duke's diner. The car's purring engine cut through the peaceful quiet of Main Street, drawing curious glances from the locals heading home after their dinner. Cal was just finishing his coffee at the counter when the diner's bell chimed. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped inside, his polished leather shoes clicking against the worn linoleum floor. His presence seemed to suck the warmth right out of the homey space. Duke paused mid-wipe of a coffee mug, his weathered face creasing with concern. Even Rosie, sprawled in her usual booth with homework, looked up and frowned. The man's eyes swept the diner before landing on Elena, who sat in the corner booth reviewing grant paperwork. She stiffened, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. "Elena?" the man said, his voice smooth as silk but cold as ice. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "Victor." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "What are you doing here?" Cal straightened on his stool, every military-honed instinct telling him to stay alert. This had to be Victor Hale, Elena's CFO that Duke had warned him about. Victor slid into Elena's booth uninvited, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. "The board is concerned. You've missed 3 meetings, canceled the Singapore merger talks, and now you're—" He gestured at the humble diner, with barely concealed disdain. "Here, I'm exactly where I need to be," Elena replied. "Working on a new community investment project." "You mean hiding?" Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This little adventure of yours needs to end. The merger timeline." "There is no merger timeline," Elena cut in, her voice sharp. "I've made my position clear. I won't be part of your marriage scheme." Victor's practiced smile didn't reach his eyes. "Think about what you're throwing away. The Asian markets, the expansion possibilities. Your father built this company on strategic alliances." "My father built it on helping people," Elena said, "not on using marriage as a business transaction." Cal could see Elena's hands trembling slightly as she gathered her papers. Several other diners were pretending not to watch, but the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. "You're being naive," Victor said, his smooth facade cracking slightly. "The board won't stand for this forever. There are ways to force a leadership change if necessary." Elena stood up, her chin high. "Is that a threat, Victor?" "A reminder." He rose as well, towering over her. "Of what's at stake? Your little charity projects, your foundation's autonomy, it all depends on maintaining control of the company." Cal found himself moving before he consciously decided to, coming to stand near Elena's booth. He didn't say anything, but his presence seemed to make Victor reassess the situation. "Mr. Hale," Cal said quietly, "I believe the lady's made her position clear." Victor's eyes flicked to Cal, taking in his work-worn hands and military bearing. A slight sneer touched his lips. "And you are?" "Someone who knows when a conversation's over," Cal replied evenly. A tense moment passed. Victor straightened his already perfect tie. "We'll continue this discussion in New York, Elena, where it belongs." He turned and strode out, the diner's bell jingling with false cheerfulness. Through the window, they watched the Mercedes glide away into the darkness. The diner seemed to collectively exhale. Duke appeared with a fresh pot of coffee. "You okay, Miss Elena?" Elena sank back into her booth, the calm mask she'd worn cracking slightly. "I will be." She looked up at Cal, who still stood nearby. "Thank you." Cal slid into the seat across from her. "Want to talk about it?" Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, as if seeking warmth. "Victor's been pushing this merger for months. It would mean combining with a major Asian conglomerate through—" She swallowed. "Through marriage. To their CEO's son. All very traditional, very strategic, and very wrong," Cal observed quietly. "Yes." Elena's voice shook slightly. "But he's right about one thing. The board. They have ways to pressure me. And Victor knows all our weaknesses, all our vulnerabilities." She met Cal's eyes. "I'm scared, Cal. Not just for myself, but for everything my foundation's built. For all the people who depend on us." Cal could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes, the fear she usually kept hidden behind her confident exterior. It stirred something protective in him, something he hadn't felt since his wife passed. Rosie appeared beside their booth, homework forgotten. Without a word, she slid in next to Elena and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Elena leaned into the simple comfort, closing her eyes briefly. The diner's regular sounds resumed gradually. The clink of dishes, the soft murmur of conversations, the hum of the old ceiling fans. But Cal couldn't shake the chill that Victor's visit had left behind, or the nagging sense that this was just the beginning of trouble. The fellowship hall of Willow Creek First Methodist buzzed with warmth and chatter as paper streamers danced from exposed wooden beams. Long tables draped in white cloths stretched end to end, laden with steaming casseroles and homemade pies. The scent of fried chicken and fresh-baked rolls wrapped around everyone like a grandmother's hug. Cal Whitaker shifted in his metal folding chair, tugging at his collar. He wasn't used to wearing his good shirt anymore, the blue one Sarah had bought him years ago, but tonight felt special. Elena sat beside him in a simple cotton dress, her dark hair caught up in a casual twist. She looked nothing like the billionaire the papers portrayed, and that made his heart lift a little. "More potatoes, Mr. Cal?" Marisol appeared at his elbow with a serving bowl, her gentle smile matching her soft voice. "Thanks, Marisol. And please, just Cal is fine." He held up his plate as she spooned out a generous helping. Across the table, 6-year-old Tomas giggled as Rosie made faces at him between bites of green bean casserole. Pastor May clinked her water glass with a spoon, rising to address the crowd. "Friends, we're blessed tonight to welcome some new faces to our community supper. Elena Reyes and her son Tomas, along with their friend Marisol. And of course, our own Cal Whitaker has a big announcement about his garage's new veteran program." Rosie beamed at her father with pride. Cal felt his cheeks warm as scattered applause broke out. Duke, from his spot near the kitchen, gave him a knowing wink. "Now, before we dig in proper," Pastor May continued, "Mrs. Henderson's going to favor us with some piano." The old upright in the corner sprang to life with amazing grace, and soon the whole room was humming along. Cal noticed Elena's eyes grow misty as she watched Tomas swaying to the music, his small hand conducting invisible notes in the air. "You okay?" Cal whispered. Elena nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. This is what I always wanted for him. A real community. Not just galas and charity functions where he has to wear a tiny suit and mind his manners. The evening flowed like honey after that. Mrs. Peterson taught Tomas how to fold his napkin into a bird. Mr. Jenkins, the hardware store owner, promised to show Cal some vintage tools perfect for the apprentice program. Even crusty old Walter Barnes cracked a smile when Rosie helped his granddaughter Charlotte braid friendship bracelets at the kids' table. Marisol moved between tables with quiet grace, topping off drinks and clearing plates. But Cal noticed how the other church ladies kept drawing her into conversation, asking for her tamale recipe, complimenting her son's manners. She gradually relaxed, her shoulders losing their protective hunch. "Your daughter has such a good heart," Elena murmured as they watched Rosie lead a group of younger kids in a simple dance. "She makes everyone feel included." "Gets that from her mama," Cal replied, then felt the familiar pang. But tonight it was softer somehow, more bittersweet than sharp. Sarah would have loved this evening. The hall glowed golden in the setting sun, streaming through tall windows. Someone had strung white Christmas lights along the walls, creating a magical sparkle as darkness crept in. Children darted between tables playing tag while their parents lingered over coffee and Mrs. Henderson's famous apple pie. Cal couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so at peace, like he belonged somewhere bigger than his garage or his grief. Tomas had migrated to sit between him and Elena, his dark head nodding sleepily against Cal's arm. Rosie kept shooting them fond glances between helping to stack empty plates. "Time for evening prayers," Pastor May announced. "Join hands, everyone." Cal felt Tomas's small fingers slip trustingly into his as the room bowed their heads. Elena's hand was warm in his other palm. As Pastor May's voice rose in gratitude for food and fellowship, he felt Tomas squeeze his fingers 3 times, a child's secret code for "I love you." The simple gesture caught in Cal's throat. He squeezed back gently, even as something in his chest ached with a sweetness he'd almost forgotten how to feel. When he opened his eyes, he found Elena watching him with a soft expression that made his heart skip. Marisol appeared behind Tomas's chair, ready to gather him up for bed. But for just a moment longer, they remained connected. Veteran mechanic, billionaire philanthropist, teenage daughter, sleepy boy, and gentle housekeeper, linked by clasped hands and something that felt remarkably like hope. The fellowship hall glowed golden in the evening light as the welcome supper wound down. Paper plates, dotted with crumbs and half-empty cups of sweet tea, cluttered the long tables. Cal sat contentedly beside Elena, watching Rosie help clear dishes with some of the church ladies. The gentle hum of conversation filled the room as folks lingered over dessert, savoring the last bites of Betty Wilson's famous apple pie. Tomas, who had been coloring quietly beside Cal, suddenly tugged at his sleeve. His small face turned up earnestly, dark eyes wide and trusting. Cal leaned down, expecting a request for more cookies or maybe a trip to the bathroom. Instead, in that crystal-clear voice that only children seem to possess, Tomas whispered, "Mommy says you're my daddy." The words hung in the air like suspended lightning. Cal felt his chest tighten as several heads at nearby tables swiveled their way. Mrs. Henderson's fork clattered against her plate. Someone gasped softly. Elena's face drained of color. "Tomas, mi amor, I never—" she began, but her words were lost in the sudden rustling of movement around them. From the corner of his eye, Cal caught the distinctive flash of a phone camera. Martha Simmons, who wrote the church newsletter, was already typing frantically on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "I didn't," Elena started again, reaching for Tomas. But the boy had already scampered off to join the other children by the dessert table, completely unaware of the storm he'd just unleashed. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the fellowship hall like wildfire. "Did you hear what that boy said? The millionaire mechanic and the mysterious woman. No wonder he fixed her car for free." Cal watched helplessly as Marisol, who'd been serving coffee, set down her pot with trembling hands and hurried toward the kitchen. Her face was a mask of fear and confusion. Pastor May approached their table, concern etched on her weathered face. "Perhaps we should—" she began, but was interrupted by the sharp buzz of phones throughout the room as the first text messages began circulating. The remaining hours of the evening blurred together in a haze of awkward glances and hushed conversations that died whenever Cal or Elena passed nearby. Rosie stuck close to her father's side, her jaw set in a defensive line that reminded him so much of her mother. That night, Cal barely slept. He tossed and turned, replaying Tomas's innocent words over and over. Around 3 a.m., his phone started buzzing with notifications. By dawn, he knew he had to face whatever waited outside. The early morning air was crisp as Cal pulled into the garage's gravel parking lot. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting long shadows across the ground. He stepped out of his truck and stopped dead in his tracks. Plastered across his garage door were dozens of photocopied papers, their black headlines screaming in bold text, "Mommy says you're my daddy!" Some had crude illustrations added, others had additional text speculating about secret affairs and hidden millions. The morning dew had made the papers curl at the edges, but the words remained stark and accusing in the growing light. Cal stood there, keys dangling forgotten in his hand, as the first rays of sunrise illuminated the garage door like a spotlight on his shame. The sound of another car approaching made him turn. It was Duke's old Buick, gravel crunching under its tires as it pulled to a stop. The diner owner stepped out, holding a newspaper in his hand and wearing an expression that told Cal this was just the beginning. The morning sun streamed through the blinds at Duke's diner, casting thin stripes across their usual corner booth. Cal stirred his coffee without drinking it, the spoon clinking against the ceramic in the heavy silence. Rosie sat beside him, picking at her untouched pancakes, while Elena's hands were wrapped tightly around her mug of tea. "I can't believe how fast it spread," Rosie muttered, scrolling through her phone. "It's all over social media. Someone even made memes." Cal reached over and gently lowered her phone. "Maybe we should take a break from those for now." Elena leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Cal, you have to understand. This is just a misunderstanding. Tomas is. He's imaginative. Children say things sometimes." "They sure do," Duke commented as he refilled their cups, his usual cheerful manner subdued, especially when they hear things from grown-ups. Elena's shoulders tensed. "What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing, ma'am. Just making conversation." Duke retreated, but his concerned glance at Cal spoke volumes. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Marisol hurried in, Tomas trailing behind her. Her face was drawn with worry, and she clutched her purse like a shield. When she spotted their table, she hesitated before approaching. "Senora Elena, I need to explain," Marisol said, her voice trembling. "Please." Elena gestured to the empty seats. "Of course, sit down." Tomas climbed into the booth next to Rosie, who automatically helped him with his coat. The boy seemed oblivious to the tension, reaching eagerly for the syrup-laden pancakes Duke brought over without being asked. Marisol twisted her hands in her lap. "It's my fault. I told Tomas that Mr. Whitaker was like a daddy, because he protected us that night on the road. The way he stood up to those men, how he made us feel safe." She blinked rapidly. "Tomas has never had that before. He got confused, that's all." Cal felt something in his chest loosen slightly. "That makes sense. Kids take things literally sometimes. I can clear this up easily," he continued, trying to sound reassuring. "We could do a DNA test, put all these rumors to rest." "No!" Marisol's outburst startled them all. She lowered her voice, glancing around nervously. "Please, no tests. I can't. We can't draw that kind of attention." Understanding dawned in Cal's eyes. "Your immigration status?" Marisol nodded miserably. "I'm here on a temporary work visa with Senora Elena. If people start investigating..." She looked at Tomas, who was happily drawing with crayons Duke had provided. "I can't risk losing him." Elena reached across the table and squeezed Marisol's hand. "That won't happen. I won't let it." The diner's door chimed again. A group of men from the auto parts store walked in, their eyes fixing on Cal's table. One of them smirked and whispered something that made the others laugh. Rosie half rose from her seat, but Cal's hand on her arm stopped her. "Let it go, sweetheart." "But Dad, they're being jerks. You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that. You know that. That's what matters." Pastor May appeared at their table, her kind face creased with concern. "Cal, Elena, I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted you to know the church council is meeting this afternoon. Some members are concerned about the apprenticeship program now." "Of course they are," Cal said wearily. "Can't have their precious grant money tied to a scandal." "Not everyone feels that way," Pastor May assured them. "Martha Simmons called me this morning to say she's organizing a prayer circle for all of you. And the VFW post commander asked me to tell you they're standing behind you, Cal." As if to emphasize the division, Mrs. Henderson walked past their table, ostentatiously averting her eyes while pulling her grandchildren closer. But right behind her, old Mr. Johnson, a Korean War veteran, stopped to clap Cal on the shoulder. "Hang in there, son," he said gruffly. "This town survived worse gossip than this." Duke returned with fresh coffee and a plate of his special cinnamon rolls, setting them down with deliberate casualness. "On the house," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "For my favorite customers." Elena watched the various reactions ripple through the diner. The sideways glances, the whispered conversations, the pointed support, and equally pointed snubs. Her face was composed, but Cal could see the strain around her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I never meant to bring this kind of trouble to your door." "You didn't," Cal replied firmly. "Sometimes life just throws curves at you. We'll handle it." Marisol gathered Tomas's crayons, her movements quick and nervous. "I should get him to school, Senora Elena. I'll finish the laundry when I return." "Marisol." "Wait," Cal said. "We need to figure this out. There has to be a way to protect you and Tomas while still setting the record straight." But Marisol was already hurrying Tomas toward the door, her head down. The boy turned back, waving. "Bye, Mr. Cal. Bye, Rosie." Through the diner's window, they watched Marisol rush Tomas to her car, scanning the street as if expecting trouble. The sight made Cal's jaw clench. "Well," Duke said, clearing their mostly untouched plates, "looks like Willow Creek's about to show its true colors, both the good and the bad." Rosie's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and winced. "Speaking of bad, wait till you see what they're saying at school." "Maybe you should stay home today," Cal suggested. "No way," Rosie said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm not hiding. Besides, somebody's got to defend you to all these idiots." Elena touched Cal's arm gently. "I can talk to my PR team. Try to get ahead of this." "No," Cal said firmly. "No teams, no press releases. We handle this here, in our own way. Willow Creek may be small, but we take care of our own." Through the window, they could see people gathering on the sidewalk, some pointing at the diner, others pretending not to look. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street, and somewhere in the distance, the church bells began to toll. The old church's wooden pews creaked under the weight of curious townsfolk. Evening light filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across concerned faces. Pastor May stood at the pulpit, her silver hair catching the colors as she addressed the packed room. "Tonight we're here to listen," she said, her voice warm but firm. "Not to gossip, not to judge, but to understand." Cal shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside Elena in the front row. His work shirt was freshly pressed, but he still felt out of place. Elena reached over and squeezed his hand, her touch steady and reassuring. Pastor May gestured to them both. "Would you please join me up here?" Cal's legs felt heavy as he stood. The walk to the front seemed to take forever, each step echoing in the hushed sanctuary. Elena moved with grace beside him, her head held high despite the whispers that followed. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began, her voice clear and strong. "I know there have been many rumors, many questions. I want to be honest with you." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some were friendly, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. "I came to Willow Creek because I wanted to understand how my foundation's work affects real communities. I didn't want special treatment or attention. I wanted truth." A murmur rippled through the congregation. Elena continued, "But what I found here was something more precious, genuine kindness. When Cal stopped to help us that night, he didn't know who I was. He didn't care. He just saw people who needed help." "That's not what the papers say," someone called out from the back. Pastor May raised her hand. "Let her finish, please." Elena's voice wavered slightly. "I've faced prejudice all my life. Too ethnic to be trusted with my own company, according to some board members. Too wealthy to have real feelings, according to others. Here in Willow Creek for a brief moment, I was just Elena, just a mother trying to do right by her son." Cal watched her speak, admiring her courage. When she finished, Pastor May nodded to him. He cleared his throat, unused to public speaking. "I'm not good with fancy words," he began. "But I know about service. In the Army, we didn't ask about someone's background when they needed medical attention. We just helped." His hands gripped the podium. "After my wife died, this town helped raise my daughter. You brought casseroles, fixed our roof, watched Rosie when I had late calls. That's the Willow Creek I know." Cal's voice grew stronger. "When I saw Elena and Tomas stranded in that storm, with those men hassling them, I did what any of you would have done. And yes, Elena offered to help expand the garage into something that could help veterans. But that came after we were already friends, after this community had already welcomed them." The silence in the church was complete now. Cal continued, "I've seen enough darkness in war, lost enough friends. When I came home, I promised myself I'd try to put more good into the world than bad. That's all this is. That's all it's ever been." Several veterans in the crowd nodded. Mrs. Thompson, who'd lost her son in Afghanistan, wiped her eyes. Pastor May stepped forward. "Questions?" she asked. "Remember, we're here to understand, not accuse." Hands went up. For the next hour, Elena and Cal answered honestly about the garage expansion, about Tomas's innocent comment, about their friendship. The tension in the room gradually eased as understanding grew. "The Bible tells us to welcome strangers," Pastor May concluded, "to judge not, lest we be judged. I've known Cal Whitaker since he was a boy. I've watched Elena these past weeks. Their actions speak louder than any tabloid headlines. As people filed out, many stopped to shake hands or offer support. Old Mr. Jenkins, who'd initially been skeptical, patted Cal's shoulder. "You're a good man, Whitaker. Don't let anyone tell you different." Outside the church, the spring evening was mild and sweet. Stars were just beginning to appear above the steeple. Church members lingered on the steps, talking in small groups. The mood had shifted, not completely, but noticeably. Elena smiled at Cal. "Thank you for doing this. I know how hard it was. Wasn't just me up there being brave," he replied softly. Across the street, partially hidden in the shadows of the old oak tree, Victor Hale leaned against his expensive car. His tailored suit looked out of place against the small-town backdrop. A cold smile played across his face as he watched the church empty, his phone held loosely in one manicured hand. The old porch swing creaked softly as Cal and Elena swayed in the evening air. Crickets chirped their nightly symphony from the grass. and fireflies danced like tiny stars among the shadows. The lingering heat of the summer day had finally given way to a gentle coolness that made sitting outside pleasant. Cal's hands rested on his knees, his shoulders tense despite the peaceful setting. The events at church had left him drained, yet somehow lighter. Elena sat beside him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her lavender perfume mixing with the sweet summer air. "Thank you," Elena said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "for standing with me today, for believing in me." Cal nodded, his eyes fixed on the darkening yard. "You did most of the heavy lifting in there. The way you handled those questions about your wealth, your background, that took real courage." Elena's laugh held a touch of sadness. "Courage? More like practice. You know, before I built my foundation, I was just another executive trying to prove herself in a man's world. The betrayals started small, taking credit for my ideas, excluding me from meetings." She wrapped her arms around herself, as if warding off a chill despite the warm evening. Then came the bigger ones. Cal turned to face her, seeing the pain etched in the tight lines around her mouth. "Victor, among others, the board wanted me to marry him, called it a strategic merger, as if my heart was just another asset to be leveraged." She shook her head. "When I refused, suddenly there were whispers about my competence, my commitment. Even my heritage became a weapon they used against me." "That's why you travel undercover," Cal said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Yes, I needed to see the real world, not the sanitized version people show when they know you're rich." Elena's voice grew stronger. "I wanted to help people who truly needed it, not just throw money at problems from an ivory tower." The swing creaked again as Cal shifted. His hands clenched and unclenched, a nervous habit from his military days. "I understand something about people seeing you differently," he said slowly. "After I came back from my last tour, folks looked at me like I might break or explode." Elena remained quiet, giving him space to continue. The crickets filled the silence between his words. "The PTSD. It's not like in the movies. Sometimes it's just feeling disconnected, like you're watching yourself from far away." Cal's voice grew rough. "Sarah, my wife, she understood. She'd sit with me during the bad nights, just like this, not trying to fix anything, just being there." "What happened to her?" Elena asked gently. Cal swallowed hard. "Cancer. Fast and aggressive, by the time they caught it." He trailed off, the memory still raw despite the years. "Rosie was only 10. I had to learn how to be both parents while barely holding myself together." Elena's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers warm and steady. "But you did it. You raised an amazing daughter." "Some days were harder than others. The flashbacks, the anxiety I'd hide in the garage, fixing cars because machines made sense when nothing else did." He squeezed her hand. "Rosie would bring me water, remind me to eat. Sometimes I think she raised herself more than I raised her." "Children are resilient," Elena said. "But they also need to see us being human, showing them it's okay to struggle and heal." Cal nodded, feeling something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "Sarah used to say that too. She made me promise." His voice caught. "She made me promise not to close myself off after she." "It's okay," Elena whispered, moving closer. "Take your time." The porch swing swayed gently as Cal gathered himself. "She said love was too precious to waste, that my heart was big enough for more than one great love. But for so long it felt like betraying her memory to even think about it. And now?" Elena's question hung in the air between them. Cal turned to look at her. Really look at her. In the soft glow from the porch light, he saw past the billionaire, past the philanthropist, to the woman who understood what it meant to carry hidden wounds. "Now I'm starting to think Sarah was right." Inside the house, Rosie stood at the window, watching her father and Elena talk in the gathering darkness. She noticed how his shoulders had relaxed, how he leaned slightly toward Elena as they spoke. It reminded her of old photographs, the ones where her dad smiled easily, before grief had etched permanent worry lines around his eyes. A small smile tugged at Rosie's lips as she watched them. Her father was laughing now, actually laughing at something Elena had said. The sound drifted through the screen window, familiar yet different, like a favorite song played in a new key. The crickets continued their symphony, and the fireflies kept dancing. And on the porch swing, two people who had learned to guard their hearts found themselves sharing their scars in the safety of a summer night. Rosie touched the window glass lightly, feeling the lingering warmth of the day against her fingertips. For the first time in years, she saw real healing in her father's smile, and it made her own heart feel lighter. The church basement hummed with nervous energy as Pastor May stood at the front, her warm smile putting everyone at ease. Folding tables lined the walls, draped in crisp white cloths and dotted with handwritten signs. Share a dish you've never made before. Tonight, Pastor May announced, her voice carrying to every corner, we're doing something different. Each person will serve a dish they didn't cook themselves. The catch is, you have to learn about the recipe and the person who made it. Duke Harmon shifted uncomfortably near the entrance, clutching a covered casserole dish. The gruff diner owner looked as out of place as a fish on a bicycle. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Marisol Vega stood quietly by her contribution. Traditional enchiladas that had filled the basement with an enticing aroma. Her hands were clasped tightly together, but her chin was held high. Elena gave her a reassuring nod from across the room. "Let's begin." Pastor May clapped her hands. "Find a dish you've never tried before, learn its story, and share it with others." People began to move hesitantly at first. Then, with growing enthusiasm, Mrs. Johnson, who'd never ventured beyond meat and potatoes, picked up Marisol's enchiladas to serve. Her eyes widened as Marisol softly explained the recipe passed down from her grandmother. Cal watched as elderly Mr. Peterson, a Korean War veteran, carefully dished out Mrs. Kim's bulgogi, describing how she'd taught him about the marinade that morning. His weathered face lit up as he shared the story of her family's restaurant back in Seoul. Elena found herself serving Duke surprisingly delicate lemon squares. His mother's recipe, she explained to each person who came through the line. He says she used to make them every Sunday after church. The basement filled with the sounds of forks clinking against plates and voices rising and falling in conversation. The usual cliques began to dissolve as people moved between tables, sampling unfamiliar foods and sharing stories. Rosie sat with a group of her classmates, enthusiastically explaining the samosas that Mrs. Patel had taught her to fold that morning. "You have to get the triangle just right," she demonstrated with her hands, "or all the filling spills out." At a corner table, Marisol found herself surrounded by curious neighbors. Her usual shyness melted away as she described the spices in her enchiladas, the proper technique for dipping tortillas in sauce, and how her son Tomas loved to help her in the kitchen. "I never knew cooking could bring such memories," said Sarah Williams, the bank manager who'd always seemed so formal. Her eyes were soft as she listened to Marisol describe Sunday afternoons in her grandmother's kitchen. Pastor May moved through the crowd, her plate piled high with a rainbow of dishes. She paused at each table, drawing out quiet voices, encouraging connections. "Isn't it amazing," she would say, "how sharing food can open our hearts?" The evening's highlight came when Duke finally approached Marisol's table. He stood there awkwardly, plate in hand, staring at the enchiladas as if they might bite him back. "It's not going to kill you, Duke," Cal called out with a grin. The room grew quiet, watching the scene unfold. Marisol stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "The red sauce is not too spicy," she explained, serving him a portion. "My grandmother always said food should comfort, not challenge." Duke's face was a study in concentration as he took his first bite. The room held its breath, then his eyes widened, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he said softly. "This is better than my mama's pot roast." Laughter rippled through the basement, warm and genuine. Marisol's eyes shone with pride as Duke asked for seconds, then carefully wrote down her instructions for the sauce. The evening continued as more barriers fell. Mrs. Anderson, who'd once complained about foreign smells from the apartment next door, was now exchanging recipes with Mr. Patel. The high school football coach learned to properly roll sushi from shy Mrs. Tanaka, his large hands surprisingly delicate with the thin seaweed sheets. Children darted between tables, trying everything without the hesitation of their parents. Tomas proudly helped serve his mother's enchiladas, explaining the ingredients in careful English while older kids listened attentively. As the night wore on, the basement felt less like a church hall and more like a family gathering. The air was thick with the mingled aromas of a dozen different cuisines and the sound of genuine laughter. Duke's booming chuckle rang out again as he discovered his newfound love for Mexican cuisine, asking Marisol increasingly detailed questions about techniques and ingredients. Pastor May stood back, watching her congregation transform through the simple act of sharing food. She caught Elena's eye and nodded slowly. Sometimes the best sermons didn't need any words at all. Elena paced the weathered boards of Cal's front porch, her phone pressed to her ear. Morning sunlight filtered through the oak trees, casting dappled shadows that danced across her face. Her free hand gripped the railing as she listened, her knuckles slowly turning from white to pink as the news sank in. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you, board members. This means everything." Her voice trembled with emotion. She ended the call and stood still for a moment, taking deep breaths. The screen door creaked, and Cal stepped out, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Everything okay?" Elena turned, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "The foundation approved it, Cal. All of it. We're getting a satellite office here in Willow Creek." Cal's weathered face broke into a rare full smile. "That's wonderful news." "It gets better," Elena continued, her words tumbling out faster now. "The Veteran Apprenticeship Program. They're pledging full support. $1 million in capital funding." Cal's shop rag slipped from his fingers and landed silently on the wooden boards. "$1 million? You're officially a millionaire on paper now, Mr. Whitaker," Elena said softly, stepping closer. "Once the benchmarks are met, the equity is yours." Cal sank onto the porch swing, the chains creaking gently. "I never thought." He cleared his throat, fighting for composure. "All those boys coming home, needing a fresh start. Now we can really help them." Elena sat beside him, the swing swaying slightly. "You did this, Cal. Your integrity, your vision. That's what convinced them." The sound of running footsteps made them look up. Rosie burst through the garden gate, waving her phone. "Dad, the news is everywhere. Duke just called. Everyone's coming to celebrate." Throughout the afternoon, people streamed into the garage lot. Duke brought boxes of donuts from the diner. Pastor May arrived with lemonade and iced tea. Veterans who'd heard the news drove in from 3 counties over, their faces bright with hope for the program's promise. Marisol and Tomas helped string lights across the lot as the sun began to set. The warm bulbs cast a gentle glow over the gathering, transforming the humble space into something magical. Someone brought an old radio, and soft music drifted through the evening air. Cal stood near his toolbox, watching it all with wonder. A lifetime of service, of quiet dedication, had led to this moment. He thought of all the young veterans who would find purpose here, learning trades and healing alongside each other. His eyes stung as he remembered his own hard journey home from war. "Penny for your thoughts?" Elena's voice was gentle beside him. Cal turned to face her, seeing his own mix of joy and disbelief mirrored in her expression. "Just thinking about how sometimes the best dreams are the ones you never dared to have." The music shifted to something slow and sweet. Elena held out her hand. "Dance with me?" Cal hesitated for just a moment, then took her hand. They moved together under the string lights, their shadows merging on the concrete floor. The usual distance Cal kept between himself and others seemed to melt away as Elena rested her head against his shoulder. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" "For seeing something here worth believing in." Elena lifted her head to look at him, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above. "I didn't just see something worth believing in, Cal. I found it." They continued to sway together as the evening stars emerged, their dance witnessed by the warm glow of lights and the approving smiles of their makeshift family. In this moment, all the complications and worries that usually weighed on them seemed far away, replaced by the simple joy of 2 hearts finding their rhythm together. Around them, the celebration continued, Rosie showing Tomas how to do a silly dance move, Duke passing out more donuts, veterans clustering in small groups talking excitedly about the apprenticeship program. But Cal and Elena remained in their own peaceful bubble, moving slowly to the music, neither wanting the moment to end. The string lights sparkled overhead like earthbound stars, casting their gentle glow over the scene. In this transformed space that had once been just a humble garage, dreams were taking flight, dreams of healing, of purpose, of belonging. And in the center of it all, 2 people who had started as strangers on a stormy night continued their dance, their shadows intertwined on the concrete floor below. The scent of cinnamon and warm butter filled Cal's kitchen as sunlight streamed through the checkered curtains. Elena stood at the counter, flour dusting her dark hair, while Rosie carefully measured vanilla extract into a mixing bowl. "Like this?" Rosie asked, showing Elena the slightly sticky dough she'd been kneading. "Perfect." Elena smiled, reaching over to tuck a loose strand of hair behind Rosie's ear. Your mom taught you well." Rosie's hands stilled for a moment. "Yeah, she did. She always said baking was like love. You had to be patient and pay attention to the little details." She looked up at Elena. "She would have liked you." Elena's eyes grew soft. "I wish I could have met her." From the living room came the sound of Cal's deep laugh mingling with Tomas's gleeful giggles. The boy had convinced Cal to join him on the floor with his toy cars, and they were currently staging what sounded like an elaborate race. "Daddy, my red car is winning!" Tomas called out excitedly. The kitchen grew quiet. Elena and Rosie exchanged glances, but before the moment could become awkward, Rosie deliberately bumped Elena with her hip, sending a small cloud of flour into the air. "Hey!" Elena laughed, grabbing a pinch of flour and dabbing it on Rosie's nose. "Ladies," Cal's voice came from the doorway, amused. "I thought you were making breakfast, not redecorating my kitchen." He had Tomas perched on his shoulders, the boy's small hands resting on Cal's head. "We're creating art," Rosie declared, gesturing to the mess of flour, butter, and sugar spread across the counter. "Very delicious art." Marisol appeared behind them, her arms full of fresh laundry. "Tomas, mi amor, let Cal put you down before you fall." "But I'm tall now," Tomas protested, as Cal carefully lifted him off his shoulders. "Yes, but even tall people need to help set the table," Elena said, pulling plates from the cabinet. "Want to show me where everything goes?" As Tomas proudly arranged forks and napkins, Marisol set down her laundry basket and began folding dish towels. Her movements were precise, practiced, but her eyes kept drifting to where Cal was helping Tomas place each setting just so. "You were very good with him," she said softly to Cal. He has not had." She stopped, blinking rapidly. Cal turned to her, his expression gentle. "Hey, none of that now. He's a great kid. You've done an amazing job." Marisol's hands trembled slightly as she folded the last towel. "You make him feel safe. You make us all feel safe." She touched Cal's arm briefly. "Thank you for being kind when so many are not." The timer chimed, and Elena pulled the first batch of cinnamon rolls from the oven. Golden brown and glistening, they filled the kitchen with their sweet aroma. Rosie began drizzling them with vanilla glaze while Tomas watched in fascination. "Can I help?" he asked, standing on tiptoe to see better. "Here," Rosie said, lifting him onto a kitchen stool. "You can sprinkle the extra cinnamon on top, but careful, it's still hot." They worked together, the morning sun warming the kitchen as they fell into an easy rhythm. Cal poured coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for the kids. Elena hummed softly as she worked, an old Spanish lullaby that made Marisol smile in recognition. When they finally sat down to eat, the table looked like something from a magazine. Steaming cinnamon rolls, fresh fruit, coffee cups sending up lazy spirals of steam. But it was the people gathered around it that made the scene truly beautiful. Tomas insisted on sitting between Cal and Rosie, while Elena and Marisol shared knowing looks across their coffee cups. They passed plates and traded stories, laughter bubbling up naturally between bites of warm, sticky sweetness. "Remember when you first stopped to help us?" Elena asked Cal, her eyes twinkling. "I thought you were either a serial killer or an angel." "Clearly an angel," Rosie said, nudging her father's arm. "Just a very grease-stained one." "The best kind," Tomas declared solemnly, making them all laugh. Cal watched his daughter lean over to help Tomas wipe icing from his chin, saw the way Elena's hand naturally found his under the table, noticed how Marisol's usual tension had melted into something approaching peace. This was what healing looked like, he thought. This was what family could be. The buzz of his phone against his hip interrupted the moment. Cal pulled it out, expecting a customer message about a repair job. Instead, he found himself staring at a news alert, his expression shifting from contentment to concern as he read the headline. Cal's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, interrupting the peaceful morning. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and reached for it, frowning at the stream of urgent messages flooding his screen. His face went pale. "Elena," he called out, his voice tight. "You need to see this." Elena stepped away from the cinnamon rolls, flour still dusting her hands. She peered at Cal's phone and gasped. There on the screen was what appeared to be a legal document, a paternity settlement agreement between Cal Whitaker and Marisol Vega, complete with signatures and notary stamps. "This is impossible," Elena whispered. "This is completely fabricated." Rosie came closer, her own phone pinging with notifications. "Dad, it's everywhere," Social media, news sites, everyone's sharing it. Cal's hand shook as he scrolled through the document. These aren't my signatures. I've never seen this before in my life. The sound of car doors slamming outside made them all jump. Through the window, they could see two official-looking vehicles pulling up to the house. One bore the logo of Child Protective Services. "Marisol!" Elena called out urgently. "Take Tomas upstairs." But before Marisol could move, there was a sharp knock at the door. Cal opened it to find 4 people on his porch. 2 CPS workers and 2 others who identified themselves as immigration officers. "Mr. Whitaker," one of the CPS workers said, her face professionally neutral. "We're here to investigate claims of an undisclosed paternity settlement and potential child welfare concerns." The immigration officer stepped forward. "And we need to speak with Marisol Vega regarding her documentation status." Tomas clung to Marisol's legs, his eyes wide with fear. "Mommy?" The next hours passed in a blur of questions, documents, and mounting anxiety. In the living room, Cal tried to explain that the settlement was forged, while in the kitchen, the immigration officers grilled Marisol about her papers. Elena made desperate calls to her lawyers, but the damage was spreading faster than they could contain it. Cal's phone rang again. This time it was the bank. "Mr. Whitaker, in light of recent developments and potential reputational risks, we're placing a hold on your business credit line pending review." Before he could protest, another call came through. It was Elena's board chairman. "The board has voted to suspend you immediately," he told Elena, his voice cold. "Your personal entanglements have become a liability to the foundation. You are to cease all operations and partnerships until further notice." Elena's hand trembled as she ended the call. "They're freezing everything. The veteran program, the satellite office, all of it." Outside, more cars were arriving. News vans parked along the street, reporters already setting up cameras. The peaceful morning had transformed into a nightmare. The CPS workers huddled in conversation, reviewing papers and making phone calls. Finally, the lead worker approached Marisol, who sat rigid in a kitchen chair, still holding Tomas. "Given the uncertain nature of your immigration status and the questions surrounding the paternity settlement, we're required to place Tomas in temporary foster care until these matters can be resolved." "No!" Marisol cried, clutching Tomas tighter. "Please, he's all I have." Tomas began to sob. "I want to stay with Mommy." Cal stepped forward, his voice rough with emotion. "This isn't right. That settlement is fake. You can't separate them based on forged documents." "Mr. Whitaker," the CPS worker said firmly, "until we can verify the authenticity of these documents and ensure a stable environment, we must follow protocol." Elena tried to intervene, but her own suspended status left her powerless to help. They could only watch as the CPS workers gently but firmly took Tomas from Marisol's arm. The boy's cries echoed through the house as they carried him out to their car. Marisol collapsed into Elena's arms, sobbing. Through the window they could see camera flashes as reporters captured the moment for their evening headlines. Cal stood in the doorway, his fists clenched at his sides, watching the CPS car drive away with Tomas. The immigration officers led Marisol out next, explaining they needed to take her in for further questioning. Elena reached for Cal's hand, but he pulled away, his eyes haunted. "I did this," he whispered. "By letting myself hope for something more, I put everyone at risk. Tomas, Marisol, you." "Cal, no," Elena protested, but he was already turning away, retreating into himself just as he had after losing his wife. They stood in the wreckage of their morning, the half-finished cinnamon rolls forgotten on the counter, while outside, their dream of a future together crumbled under the weight of lies and fear. The string lights from last night's celebration still hung in the yard, now looking like nothing more than sad reminders of happiness lost. Elena sank into a kitchen chair, her suspension notice still glowing on her phone screen. Cal leaned against the wall, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Between them lay the shattered pieces of the family they'd almost become, and neither knew how to begin picking them up. The morning sun crept through the shattered windows of Cal's garage, casting broken shadows across the floor. Spray-painted slurs marred the walls, and scattered tools lay where vandals had thrown them. Cal sat on his old work stool, shoulders slumped, surrounded by the wreckage of his life's work. His fingers traced the jagged edges of a broken family photo frame he'd kept on his desk. Behind the cracked glass, he and Rosie smiled at a county fair cotton candy stuck to their cheeks. That had been a good day. back when things were simple. The bell above the door chimed softly. Cal didn't look up, knowing the garage was closed. Heavy footsteps approached, followed by the rustle of a long skirt. "Thought I might find you here." Pastor May's warm voice filled the space. She pulled up another stool, settling beside him with a quiet grunt. "Lord have mercy on these troubled hearts." Cal's jaw tightened. "Not sure mercy's what we need right now, Pastor. Tomas is in foster care. Marisol's terrified. Elena's career is in shambles. And Rosie." His voice caught. "Rosie cried herself to sleep last night." Pastor May nodded slowly, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Sometimes the hardest storms show us what we're made of." She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, edges soft with age. "Speaking of which, I've been holding on to something for you." Cal glanced at the envelope. His name was written across the front in familiar handwriting that made his heart catch, Sarah's handwriting. His late wife's penmanship, elegant and sure, just like she'd been. "Sarah left this with me years ago," Pastor May explained softly. "Said I'd know when it was time. Well, I reckon that time is now." Cal's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. "How long?" "She brought it to me about a month before the accident. Said sometimes God lets us leave messages for the future, even when we don't know why." The paper felt both fragile and heavy in Cal's hands. He carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Sarah's words flowed across the page. "My dearest Cal, if you're reading this, then something's happened to make Pastor May think you need these words. Knowing you like I do, you're probably facing something that's got your heart tied up in knots, the kind that makes you want to retreat into your garage and shut out the world. Remember that summer we met? You were so careful with your heart back then, too. Worried about letting anyone close after what you'd seen in combat. But you took a chance on love anyway. And look at the life we built. So here's what I need you to know. You were made for more than just surviving." Calvin James Whitaker. "You were made for loving. For fighting the good fight. For standing up when others back down." If Pastor May's given you this letter, you're at a crossroads. And knowing you, you're probably thinking about taking the safe path, the one that protects your heart but leaves it lonely. Don't do it, love. Choose the brave thing instead. Choose to love again, even if it's scary. Choose to fight for what matters, even when it hurts. Our Rosie needs to see that kind of courage. You've got so much heart left to give, Cal. Don't bury it in this garage with memories of me. I had my season of loving you, and it was beautiful. But seasons change, and that's as it should be. Be brave, my love. Choose life. Choose love. I'll be cheering you on from heaven's grandstands. All my love. Sarah. Cal pressed his fingers to his eyes, fighting back tears. Pastor May's hand settled warm on his shoulder. "She knew you pretty well?" the pastor said softly. "Yeah." Cal's voice was rough. "She always did." He looked around the vandalized garage, seeing it with new eyes. Every broken window, every ugly word sprayed on his walls, they weren't just attacks. They were challenges, tests of what he was made of. He stood up slowly, tucking Sarah's letter carefully into his shirt pocket, close to his heart. Walking to his toolbox, he pulled out an old wrench, the same one he'd carried in his medical kit overseas. It had saved lives there, helped him fix things that were broken. Maybe it could do the same here. "They think they can shame us into hiding," Cal said, gripping the wrench. "Think they can bully Marisol into silence, scare Elena away, break our spirit." He shook his head. "But they don't know us very well, do they?" Pastor May smiled. "No, child, they surely don't." Cal walked to his workbench, straightening tools with purpose. "I'm going to fight for Tomas, fight for Marisol's right to stay here. Stand by Elena while she faces down her board." He glanced at the wrench in his hand. This simple tool that had become a symbol of his ability to fix what was broken, to heal what was hurt. "And I'm going to love them all, fear be damned." "Now that," Pastor May said, rising to her feet with dignity, "sounds like the Cal Whitaker I know." She headed for the door, then paused. "Sarah would be proud of you, son." Cal stood in the morning light, streaming through broken windows, his wife's letter close to his heart and his service wrench solid in his hand. The vandals had meant to break his spirit, but they'd only succeeded in showing him what he was made of. The same steel that had carried him through war would carry him through this. He pulled out his phone and dialed Elena's number. It was time to stop hiding, time to fight, time to choose the brave thing. Rosie Whittaker sat at her desk, the soft glow of her laptop illuminating her determined face. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she poured her heart into what she hoped would change minds in Willow Creek. "What if we believe the best about people?" she typed. "What if, instead of jumping to the worst conclusions, we chose to see the good? I've watched my dad, Cal Whittaker, fix cars in this town for 15 years. He's helped stranded families at midnight, given veterans discounts they didn't ask for, and taught me that character matters more than money." She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Now I watch people who've known us forever whisper behind their hands. They see headlines and forget the man who changed their tires in the rain. They forget Elena Rivera, who could have lived in luxury but chose to understand how her charity actually helps people. They forget Marisol, who works harder than anyone I know to give her son a better life." At Duke's diner, Elena spread financial documents across a corner booth, while Duke peered over her shoulder, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he pointed to a series of transactions. "There," Duke said, jabbing his finger at a line item. "Victor's been doctoring the numbers. Look at these dates." Elena leaned in, her professional mask cracking as she noticed the pattern. "The timestamps on these transfers, they don't match the board meetings. And these signatures." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through old emails. "I never approved these. That sneaky son of a—" Duke caught himself glancing around his empty diner. "Sorry, ma'am." "No, please, continue," Elena said, a spark of hope lighting her eyes. "I've wanted to call him worse." Across town, in the church office, Pastor May's son, James, spread legal papers across a folding table. His tie was loosened, and his lawyer's credentials hung proudly on a lanyard around his neck. "The key is getting sworn statements from everyone who can verify the timeline," he explained. "We need to prove where you were, what was said, and most importantly, who had access to the company's documentation system." Duke's tech-savvy nephew, Tommy, hunched over his laptop nearby. "The IP addresses from the leaked documents trace back to a coffee shop near Victor's office," he reported. "And get this, the metadata shows they were created weeks before he claimed to discover them." Elena's phone buzzed. It was a message from the local paper's editor. "Rosie's piece is going viral. Comments flooding in. People are sharing their own stories about Cal. Your foundation's work. Want to run it front page tomorrow." Rosie's words had struck a chord. "My dad taught me that when you judge someone without knowing their whole story, you miss the chance to see something beautiful. Maybe Willow Creek is big enough for both millionaires and mechanics. Maybe we're brave enough to admit we were wrong, and kind enough to start again." At the courthouse, James filed the affidavits while Elena submitted the financial evidence. Sheriff Cooper nodded gravely as he reviewed the forgery documentation. "This is serious stuff," he said, reaching for his phone. "I'm calling the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. They'll want to see this." Duke stood beside Elena, his usual gruff demeanor softened by concern. "You okay?" Elena squared her shoulders, drawing strength from the small-town diner owner who'd become an unexpected ally. "I'm better than okay," she said. "For the first time since this started, I feel like the truth might actually matter." Back at the garage, Cal repaired a customer's brake line while Rosie read him encouraging comments from the paper's website. "Mr. Johnson says he remembers when you fixed his truck for free during the flood," she said. "Mrs. Peterson wrote about how you helped her son get into trade school." The bell over the door chimed as Pastor May entered, holding a copy of Rosie's article. "This," she said, waving the paper. "This is what faith in action looks like. Standing up for truth with love." Tommy burst in, laptop under his arm. "We got him!" he exclaimed. "The evidence is solid. Victor's whole scheme is unraveling." Cal set down his wrench, pride for his daughter warring with cautious hope. The whole town had seemed against them just days ago, but Rosie's words had opened hearts. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would be enough. "Dad," Rosie said softly, "people are starting to remember who you really are." Duke called from the doorway. "Sheriff's got the FBI on the line. They're very interested in Victor's creative accounting." Elena stood in the garage entrance, holding a thick folder of evidence. Her eyes met Cal's, and years of corporate armor fell away. She was just a woman who'd found something real in a small town, fighting to keep it. Together, they walked to the sheriff's office. Their footsteps echoed on the sidewalk where, not long ago, whispers and accusations had followed them. Now, neighbors nodded in greeting. Some even smiled. Inside, Sheriff Cooper accepted the final pieces of evidence. "We'll need statements from all of you," he said, "but this is more than enough to start formal proceedings." Elena watched as he carefully logged each document. Every paper, every digital record, every sworn statement was another nail in Victor's coffin of lies. The truth, so long buried under money and power, was finally rising to the surface. The sheriff's printer hummed, spitting out receipt copies. "Sign here," he said. "To confirm chain of custody." One by one, they signed. Elena's elegant script, Cal's steady mechanic's hand, Duke's determined scrawl, Pastor May's flowing signature, and Rosie's determined young writing. Each signature was a testament to a community choosing truth over scandal, love over fear. As they left the station, the setting sun painted Willow Creek's Main Street in warm gold. Shop windows displayed copies of Rosie's article. Outside the diner, someone had hung a banner. "We believe in good people." The evidence was submitted. The authorities were engaged. And in the hearts of Willow Creek's people, a simple question was taking root. What if we believed the best? The marble hallway of the Willow Creek courthouse buzzed with whispers and shuffling feet. Morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Cal Whitaker stood straight-backed in his pressed blue shirt, his military bearing evident even now. Next to him, Elena Rivera's simple black dress and quiet dignity made her look more like a small-town teacher than a billionaire. The courtroom doors opened, and people filed in. Duke brought a thermos of coffee for everyone. Pastor May led her congregation members to fill 3 wooden benches. Veterans from Cal's garage wore their service pins, forming a solid wall of support. On the other side sat Victor's corporate lawyers in expensive suits, their leather briefcases gleaming. Judge Martha Wilson adjusted her glasses and called the court to order. The Child Protective Services representative, Miss Chen, approached the podium first. "Your Honor, we have concerns about the child's welfare, given the unclear paternity situation and allegations of financial impropriety," Miss Chen stated, shuffling her papers. The temporary placement was ordered for Tomas Vega's protection during investigation. Cal's jaw tightened, but he remained still. Elena reached over and squeezed his hand. The judge turned to Elena. "Miss Rivera, please approach." Elena walked to the witness stand, her heels clicking softly on the floor. After being sworn in, she faced the courtroom with quiet strength. "Ms. Rivera, can you explain your relationship with Mr. Whitaker and the child in question?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor. Cal Whitaker is one of the most honorable men I've ever met. He helped me and my housekeeper's son when we were stranded in a storm. He protected us from harassment without knowing who I was. The partnership grant for his veterans program was based purely on merit." Victor's lawyer stood. "But isn't it true that you've been hiding from your responsibilities at Rivera Enterprises? That this small-town romance is just an escape?" "Objection, argumentative," called Pastor May's son, James, who was serving as their attorney. "Sustained," the judge said firmly. Elena's voice remained steady. "I came to Willow Creek to see how our foundation's money actually helped people. What I found was a community of genuine care and a man who serves others without seeking recognition. The only person hiding truth here is Victor Hale." James approached with a stack of documents. "Your Honor, we have evidence of systematic fraud by Mr. Hale, including the forged paternity settlement." The courtroom stirred as James presented financial records, IP traces, and sworn statements from tech experts. Victor's face grew increasingly pale. Marisol Vega was called next. She trembled slightly but held her head high as she took the stand. Her simple blue dress and neat bun reflected the dignity Cal had always seen in her. "Mrs. Vega, please tell us about the comment your son made at the church supper," the judge prompted. Marisol's voice was soft but clear. "Tomas saw how Mr. Whitaker protected us that night on the road. He was kind to us, made us feel safe. I told my son that Mr. Whitaker was like what a daddy should be, someone who helps and protects. Tomas is 6. He took my words literally." "And your immigration status?" Victor's lawyer pressed. "I am here legally," Marisol answered. "Mr. Hale threatened to report me falsely to force Miss Rivera's compliance with the merger. But I have all my documentation." James presented Marisol's properly filed paperwork. The judge reviewed it carefully. Cal was the last to testify. He stood tall, his military bearing apparent. "Mr. Whitaker, what is your interest in this situation?" the judge asked. "Your Honor, I'm a father. I know what it means to protect and love a child. Tomas needs his mother, not a foster home. He needs stability, not tabloid headlines. I offered a DNA test to end speculation, but that was never the point. The point is that good people were hurt by lies." Victor shifted uncomfortably as Cal continued. "I've seen enough destruction and war. What we need here is healing. Tomas deserves to grow up in a community that believes the best in people, not the worst." The evidence mounted. Duke testified about overhearing Victor's threats. A tech-savvy teenager showed how the forged documents traced back to Victor's private server. Pastor May presented documentation of the community's support. Judge Wilson removed her glasses and surveyed the courtroom. "I've seen enough. Mr. Hale, please stand." Victor rose shakily, his usual polish cracking. "Bailiff, place Mr. Hale under arrest for fraud, forgery, and witness intimidation. Miss Chen, the CPS case is dismissed. Mrs. Vega's custody is fully restored." The courtroom doors opened. Tomas, who had been waiting with a social worker, burst in. His small shoes squeaked on the floor as he ran straight to Cal, who caught him in a bear hug. Marisol covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "You came back." Tomas wrapped his arms around Cal's neck. "Of course I did, buddy," Cal whispered, holding the boy close as Elena and Marisol joined them. The judge watched the scene with a slight smile, then tapped her gavel. "Court is adjourned." As Victor was led away in handcuffs, the courthouse erupted in quiet celebration. Duke clapped Cal's shoulder. Pastor May dabbed her eyes. Rosie hugged Elena tightly. In the warm morning light streaming through the courthouse windows, they stood together, not as billionaire, veteran, and housekeeper, but as family, surrounded by a community that had chosen to believe in love over lies. Sunlight bathed the courthouse steps in warm golden light as the heavy wooden doors swung open. A wave of cheers erupted from the crowd gathered on the lawn. Cal stepped out first, his eyes squinting against the brightness, his hand steadying Elena beside him. Tomas clung to Marisol's hand, but his eyes kept darting to Cal with unguarded joy. The veterans lined the steps, forming an impromptu honor guard. One by one, they raised their hands in crisp salutes to Cal. Old Jim Thompson, leaning on his cane, struggled to straighten his bent back, but managed a perfect salute, tears glinting in his weathered eyes. Cal returned each salute, his throat tight with emotion. "At ease, brothers," he finally managed to say, his voice rough. Women from the church surged forward to embrace Elena. Pastor May wrapped her in a fierce hug, whispering prayers of thanks. Mrs. Duke pressed containers of fresh-baked cookies into everyone's hands. Her usual gruff manner softened by the moment. Rosie bounced down the steps, her phone clutched tight. "Dad! The foundation board just sent their statement. They've reinstated Elena fully!" She thrust the phone at her father, practically vibrating with excitement. Elena read the message over Cal's shoulder, her hand covering her mouth. The statement was clear and unequivocal. Not only was she reinstated, but the board formally apologized for acting hastily. The Willow Creek Satellite Project was approved with expanded funding. "They're calling it a model for rural community investment," Rosie explained, beaming. "They want to replicate it in other towns." Duke cleared his throat from nearby. "That ain't all." He handed Marisol an official-looking envelope. "My cousin in immigration pushed it through. Your permanent residency application is approved. Rush processing." His gruff voice softened. "Welcome home officially." Marisol's hands shook as she opened the envelope. When she saw the documents inside, she burst into tears. Tomas hugged her legs, not fully understanding but feeling her joy. The church ladies surrounded her with support, tissue packets appearing as if by magic. Pastor May's son, Daniel, the legal aid attorney, descended the courthouse steps with his briefcase. The judge was impressed by the community support, he said. She specifically mentioned how the town came together, said she hadn't seen anything like it in 30 years on the bench. More people gathered on the lawn, students from Rosie's school wearing Believe the Best t-shirts, mechanics from neighboring towns who'd supported Cal's garage during the crisis, farmers and shop owners and teachers. They formed a loose circle around Cal, Elena, and their unexpected family. "Speech!" someone called out. Others took up the cry. Cal shook his head, but Elena stepped forward. Her simple dignity hushed the crowd. "When I came to Willow Creek, I was running away," she admitted. "From pressure, from people who saw me as a business asset instead of a person." She smiled at Cal. "But what I found here wasn't an escape. It was a homecoming." Cheers and applause interrupted her. When they quieted, she continued, "This town showed me what real wealth looks like. It's not in bank accounts or boardrooms. It's in neighbors who bring casseroles when you're hurting. Veterans teaching kids how to change oil and believe in themselves. A community that chooses faith over fear, truth over rumors, love over division." More cheers erupted. Cal found himself pulled forward to stand beside her. Rosie joined them, then Marisol and Tomas. Someone started singing Amazing Grace, and others joined in, the sound swelling in the morning air. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena turned to Cal. Her dark eyes were soft with emotion. She reached for his hand, twining their fingers together. "I didn't need a millionaire," she whispered. "I needed a home." The truth of it settled over them both like a blessing. Cal's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle promise. Around them, their joined family and the town that had become their shelter continued to celebrate. But in that moment, they were in a world of their own, two hearts that had finally found their way home. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Cal's vandalized garage as he surveyed the damage. Crude words still marred the walls, a painful reminder of the recent turmoil. But today was different. Today was about renewal. Pickup trucks began rolling into the gravel lot, their beds loaded with paint cans, brushes, and cleaning supplies. Duke's ancient Ford rattled up first, Pastor May in the passenger seat with boxes of donuts and thermoses of coffee balanced on her lap. More vehicles followed, bringing what seemed like half the town with them. Elena stepped out of her car, dressed in old jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She carried 2 gallons of primer in each hand. "Ready to make this place shine?" she asked Cal with a warm smile. "More than ready," Cal replied, his voice rough with emotion as he watched Rosie directing volunteers like a seasoned foreman. "The blue paint goes over there," Rosie called out, pointing to a designated spot. "And we need those scrapers by the west wall." She had her mother's organizational skills, Cal thought with a bittersweet ache. The community moved with purpose. Veterans in well-worn work clothes attacked the graffiti with wire brushes and determination. Young guys from the high school football team hauled lumber for new shelving units. Church ladies set up a snack station, complete with Elena's homemade empanadas and Miss Betty's famous chocolate chip cookies. Tomas darted between the adults, clutching a small watering can. "Rosie," he called out, "I found the perfect spot for the flowers." He pointed to a patch of dirt near the entrance, his face bright with excitement. Rosie knelt beside him, pulling packets of seeds from her pocket. "These are marigolds," she explained, showing him the picture on the packet. "They're tough little flowers, kinda like us." She helped him dig small holes in the soil, their heads bent together in concentration. Inside the garage, Cal and Elena worked side by side, rolling primer over the hateful words until they disappeared beneath clean white paint. Each stroke felt like erasing a bad memory, replacing darkness with light. "Remember when you first stopped to help us?" Elena asked, reaching up to catch a drip before it fell. "I never imagined we'd end up here." Cal nodded, thinking of that rain-soaked night that had changed everything. "Sometimes the best things in life catch you by surprise," he said quietly. The morning wore on, and the transformation became more visible with each passing hour. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and gleaming tool chests lined the workspace. The veterans who would soon train here moved through the space, offering suggestions for layout and equipment placement. Old Jim Thompson, who'd served in Vietnam, ran his weathered hand along a newly installed workbench. "This here's going to change lives," he said, his voice gruff. "Give some of our boys a real chance." Around noon, Marisol arrived with huge pots of homemade soup and stacks of tortillas. The workers gathered in the shade of the building, sharing food and stories. Laughter mixed with the sounds of construction and repair. "You've got oil on your nose," Cal told Elena as they sat on the tailgate of his truck eating lunch. She wrinkled her nose, making Tomas giggle as he sat between them, his small legs swinging. "A little dirt never hurt anyone," she replied. deliberately smudging a dot of paint on Cal's cheek in retaliation. After lunch, the final touches began coming together. A new computer system was installed in the office, ready to track apprentice progress and manage the books. The waiting area received comfortable chairs donated by the furniture store downtown, and local artists hung paintings of classic cars on the freshly painted walls. Outside, Tomas and Rosie's flower bed took shape. They planted marigolds, zinnias, and black-eyed Susans in careful rows. "They'll bloom all summer," Rosie promised, helping Tomas pat the soil around each seedling. "And next year they'll come back even stronger." As the afternoon light began to soften, Cal climbed the ladder one last time. In his hands, he held the new sign, simple, professional lettering, on a solid wooden board. "Whitaker, Friends Veteran Garage." It read with "Service Training Community" beneath in smaller text. The crowd grew quiet as Cal positioned the sign. Elena steadied the ladder while Rosie and Tomas watched from below, hands clasped together. With careful movements, Cal secured the sign in place, each turn of the screwdriver deliberate and final. When he stepped back down, Rosie wrapped her arms around his waist, and Tomas pressed against his leg. Elena slipped her hand into his, and together they looked up at the sign that represented not just a business, but a new beginning. The garage wasn't just a building anymore. It had become a symbol of what could happen when a community chose love over fear, truth over rumors, and hope over hatred. The fresh paint gleamed in the late afternoon sun, and the newly planted flowers swayed gently in the breeze, promising future blooms. The Missouri sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Cal Whitaker wiped his hands on a shop rag, studying the freshly painted walls of his garage. The new sign gleamed above, "Whitaker, Friends Veteran Garage." His heart swelled with pride at how far they'd come. Elena stood nearby, admiring their community's handiwork. She'd changed from her paint-splattered work clothes into a simple sundress, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. The evening breeze carried the sweet scent of honeysuckle from the riverbank. "Take a walk with me?" Cal asked, his voice gentle. He held out his hand to her. Elena's eyes sparkled as she slipped her hand into his. "Lead the way." They strolled together down the winding path toward the river, their footsteps crunching on gravel before transitioning to the softer earth of the trail. The setting sun cast long shadows through the trees, and the first hints of dusk were settling over Willow Creek. The river flowed peacefully beside them, its surface reflecting the golden light of evening. Cal felt the weight of his late wife's letter in his pocket, her words echoing in his mind. "Choose the brave thing, love again." The paper was worn now from how many times he'd unfolded and read it, finding strength in her final gift of blessing. They reached a small clearing where the riverbank widened, a favorite spot where Cal used to bring Rosie for picnics. An old wooden bench, weathered but sturdy, faced the water. Wild daisies dotted the grass around them. "Remember that first night?" Cal asked, stopping at the water's edge. "When you were stranded in the storm?" Elena squeezed his hand. "How could I forget? You were my knight in a rusty pickup truck." "I was just doing what needed doing," Cal said, his voice rough with emotion. Never imagined how much that one stop would change everything. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the river flow. The first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky above them. "You know," Cal continued, turning to face her, "I spent years thinking I had to carry everything alone. Raise Rosie, run the garage, keep my memories locked away where they couldn't hurt anyone else." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But then you came along, Elena Rivera, pretending to be broke and changing all our lives." Elena's eyes glistened. "I was running away from a life that felt empty despite all the wealth. I never expected to find something so real here." Cal reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against both the letter and a small velvet box. His heart thundered in his chest, but his hands were steady like they'd been in combat, steady like when he worked on engines, steady like when he'd first helped Elena that stormy night. "I've learned something these past months," he said softly. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't facing danger or fighting battles. Sometimes it's opening your heart again, letting love in, even when you're scared." Elena's breath caught as Cal slowly lowered himself to one knee. The grass was still damp from the afternoon rain, but he didn't notice. All he saw was her face, beautiful in the fading light. "I'm not a billionaire," he said with a slight smile. Just a small-town mechanic with some battle scars and a whole lot of love to give. But if you'll have me, I promise to stand by you through whatever storms come our way." His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. It caught the last rays of sunlight, sending tiny sparkles dancing across Elena's tear-streaked cheeks. "Elena Rivera, will you marry me?" She covered her mouth with her hands, tears flowing freely now. For a moment, only the sound of the river and the evening birds filled the air. Then she nodded, dropping to her knees in front of him. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Cal Whitaker. 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the first fireflies of evening began to emerge, their gentle lights twinkling around the couple like nature's own celebration. Cal pulled Elena into his arms, holding her close as she buried her face in his shoulder. The fireflies danced around them, their soft lights reflecting off the river's surface like scattered stars. In that moment, all the pain and struggles of the past months dissolved into something beautiful, a promise of tomorrow, a future built on love and truth and second chances. They held each other as darkness settled fully around them, the fireflies continuing their graceful dance, witnesses to a love that had grown from a chance encounter on a stormy night into something strong enough to weather any storm. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Duke's Diner, casting warm patches of light across the worn counter. The usual breakfast crowd had cleared out, leaving just a handful of regulars nursing their coffee cups. The familiar scent of bacon and maple syrup lingered in the air, mixing with the fresh pot of coffee Duke had just brewed. Marisol Vega sat in a booth near the window, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at the stack of papers before her. Tomas pressed against her side, his small face bright with excitement, even though he couldn't read all the big words on the documents. The leather of the booth creaked as Elena slid in across from them, while Cal stood nearby, his quiet presence reassuring. Duke kept glancing over from behind the counter, pretending to wipe the same spot over and over. His gruff exterior couldn't hide the smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Just sign here," Elena said softly, pointing to the marked line. "And here. And one more time here." Marisol's pen hesitated above the paper. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at her son, then at Cal and Elena. "I never thought this day would come," she whispered in her accented English. "To be safe. To be legal." Cal placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've always belonged here, Marisol. Now the papers just make it official." With careful strokes, Marisol signed her name on each line. Each signature seemed to lift a weight from her shoulders, years of fear and uncertainty falling away. Tomas bounced in his seat, understanding that something important was happening, even if he didn't grasp all the details. "Does this mean we can stay forever, Mama?" he asked, his dark eyes wide. "Sí, mi amor," Marisol replied, pulling him close. "This is our home now. Really our home." Elena gathered the papers, carefully organizing them into a folder. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "The foundation will help set you up with job training, Marisol. Any field you want to pursue. Nursing, teaching, business. The choice is yours." Marisol straightened her shoulders, a new confidence visible in her bearing. "I want to help other mothers like me," she declared. "The ones who are afraid, who feel alone. I want to show them there is hope, there is a way forward." Duke appeared at the table, setting down a plate of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls. "On the house," he mumbled, then added gruffly, "Welcome home, officially." The bell above the diner door chimed as Pastor May entered, her weathered face breaking into a wide smile when she saw the group. She made her way to their booth, her practical shoes tapping against the linoleum floor. "Did our girl sign the papers?" she asked, though she could read the answer in their faces. Marisol stood, and Pastor May enveloped her in a warm embrace. "This," the pastor said, her voice thick with emotion, "this is what resurrection looks like. Hope coming back to life, right here in Willow Creek." Tomas tugged at Pastor May's sleeve. "Pastor May, Mama's not crying because she's sad anymore. She's crying happy tears." "That's right, young man," Pastor May agreed, reaching down to ruffle his hair. "Sometimes joy is so big it spills right out of our eyes." The morning lights seemed to grow brighter, warming the scene as Marisol hugged her son close. The diner felt like sacred ground, holy in its ordinary way, as they celebrated this moment of transformation. Duke pretended to be busy with his coffee pot, but everyone could see him wiping his eyes with the corner of his apron. "You did this," Marisol said, looking at Cal and Elena. You saw me when I was invisible. You fought for us when others wanted to send us away." "No," Elena replied, reaching across the table to squeeze Marisol's hand. "You did this. Your courage, your determination, your love for Tomas. That's what brought us here." "We just walked beside you." Cal nodded in agreement. Sometimes people just need someone to stand with them, to remind them they're not alone. The moment was interrupted by Tomas's excited squeal as Duke appeared with a chocolate milk, complete with a swirly straw. "Special occasion calls for special drinks," Duke said with a wink. Marisol smoothed her son's hair, watching him attack the chocolate milk with enthusiasm. Her eyes held a new light. The shadow of fear finally lifted. She looked around the diner, at Cal's steady presence, Elena's warm smile, Duke's gruff kindness, and Pastor May's wise eyes, and saw not strangers or threats, but family. "I promise," she said softly but firmly, "I will help other mothers find their way here, to safety, to hope, to home. This is not just my victory, it will be theirs too." Pastor May's eyes crinkled with joy as she wrapped an arm around Marisol's shoulders. "That's how hope works, dear one. It multiplies, it spreads. What was dead comes back to life, and then helps others rise too." The Channel 5 news van parked outside Duke's diner stood out like a shiny penny in Willow Creek's modest downtown. Inside, Rosie Whitaker perched on the edge of a red vinyl booth, trying not to fidget as the cameraman adjusted his equipment. Her dark hair was neatly brushed, and she wore her favorite blue sweater, the one her dad always said brought out her eyes. "Just relax," the reporter, Sarah Chen, said with a warm smile. She was younger than Rosie expected, maybe in her early 30s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "We'll have a natural conversation about your op-ed piece. Think of it as sharing your story with a friend." Rosie took a deep breath and nodded. Through the window, she could see Elena standing outside with her father, both giving her encouraging thumbs up. Duke had closed the diner for an hour to give them privacy, though he couldn't resist hovering near the coffee machine, pretending to clean while obviously eavesdropping. Rolling in 3, 2. The cameraman held up one finger, then pointed at Sarah. "I'm here with Rosie Whitaker, the 15-year-old author of the viral opinion piece, 'What If We Believe the Best?' That's captured hearts across Missouri." Sarah turned to Rosie. "Tell us what inspired you to write this powerful message." Rosie's hands twisted in her lap. She thought of Tomas's scared face when he was taken away, of the cruel whispers in school hallways, of the pain in her father's eyes. "I was tired of seeing good people hurt by rumors and judgment," she began, her voice growing stronger. "My dad taught me that real strength isn't about fighting back. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Your piece specifically addresses how the community reacted to Elena Rivera and your father. Was that difficult to write about? "Yes," Rosie admitted. "But sometimes the hardest things to say are the most important." People were so quick to believe the worst, to spread gossip without thinking about the real people getting hurt. I wanted them to stop and ask themselves, what if we chose kindness first? What if we gave people the benefit of the doubt? The camera shifted slightly, catching the morning light that streamed through the window. Sarah leaned forward, genuinely interested. "You wrote about your own experience of losing your mother and how that shaped your view of family. Can you tell us more about that?" Rosie's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. "When my mom died, people showed us so much compassion. They brought food, helped Dad with the garage, just believed in us. That's the town I know we can be." When Elena and Tomas needed that same kindness, some people forgot, but others remembered. That's what I wanted to remind everyone about. Your words seem to have struck a chord. The local paper says they've never had an opinion piece shared so widely. How does that feel? "Honestly, it's kind of scary." Rosie laughed softly. "I'm just a kid who loves to write. But Elena taught me something important. She said that when you see injustice, you can either watch it happen or use whatever voice you have to speak up." Through the window, Rosie saw Elena wipe a tear from her cheek. Her father's arm was around Elena's shoulders, pride evident in his stance. "You wrote about immigration, wealth inequality, and prejudice. Heavy topics for someone your age," Sarah observed. "What would you say to other young people who want to make their voices heard?" Rosie straightened in her seat. "Don't let anyone tell you you're too young to understand justice. We see what happens in our schools, our neighborhoods, our families. Writing this taught me that one person speaking up can give others courage to do the same. The truth is like that. It grows stronger when we share it." Sarah smiled. "Your father must be very proud." "He is." Rosie glanced outside again, meeting her dad's eyes. "But I'm the proud one. He showed me what it means to help strangers in a storm, to defend people who are different from us, to choose love over fear." I just put it into words. The interview continued, covering the community's response and the positive changes that had followed. When the cameraman finally called cut, Rosie exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing. "That was remarkable," Elena said, hurrying inside with Cal. She hugged Rosie tightly. "You spoke with such wisdom and grace. I couldn't be prouder if you were my own daughter." "Thanks," Rosie mumbled into Elena's shoulder, feeling her cheeks warm at the praise. As the news crew packed up their equipment, Duke appeared with a plate of fresh cinnamon rolls. "On the house for our local celebrity," he announced with a wink. "Never thought I'd see the day when little Rosie Whittaker would be giving interviews like a pro." Rosie picked up a warm roll, the familiar sweetness comforting. "I just hope it helps people understand." "It already has," Cal said softly, squeezing her shoulder. "The garage got 3 calls this morning from other towns, asking about starting veteran apprenticeship programs. Your words are reaching further than you know, sweetheart." Sarah Chen approached with her business card. "You have a gift, Rosie. If you're interested in journalism someday, I'd love to mentor you. The world needs more voices like yours." Rosie accepted the card with slightly sticky fingers, studying the embossed letters. For the first time, she felt the weight of her words, not as a burden, but as a bridge. Connecting people, changing minds, opening hearts. She looked around the diner, at the proud faces of her growing family, and smiled shyly. Maybe this was what her mom's letter to Dad had meant about choosing the brave thing. Sometimes being brave meant simply telling the truth and trusting that others would hear it. Duke flipped the closed sign back to open as the news van pulled away. The morning sun caught the window, throwing rainbow prisms across the worn linoleum floor. Rosie watched them dance, feeling something shift inside her. The quiet certainty that her voice, clear and true, could help light the way forward. The July morning dawned bright and clear over Willow Creek, carrying the sweet scent of fresh-cut grass and grilled hot dogs through the air. American flags fluttered from every lamppost along Main Street, their shadows dancing on the sidewalks below. In Veterans Memorial Park, red, white, and blue bunting draped the bandstand where the VFW brass band was setting up their instruments. Cal Whittaker stood at the edge of the park, watching volunteers string paper lanterns between the oak trees. His work-worn hands were clean for once, and he traded his usual mechanic shirt for a crisp blue button-down. Next to him, Elena adjusted Tomas's collar, her gentle fingers smoothing the wrinkles from his little patriotic bow tie. "Stand still, my Joe," she laughed, as the 6-year-old bounced on his toes, eyes fixed on the bounce house being inflated across the lawn. "Can I go play, please?" Tomas begged, his dark eyes sparkling with excitement. "Soon," Marisol promised, straightening her own sundress. She looked different today, more confident, Cal thought. Getting her papers had lifted a weight from her shoulders that she'd carried for far too long. Rosie emerged from the crowd, her camera hanging around her neck. Since her television interview had aired, she discovered a passion for documenting their town's stories. "The parade's lining up," she announced. "Dad, they want you at the front with the other veterans." Cal hesitated, but Elena gave him a gentle push. "Go on. We'll save you a spot for the ceremony." He joined his fellow servicemen and women gathering near the park entrance. Some wore pressed uniforms, others just veteran caps, but they all carried themselves with quiet dignity. The high school band struck up Stars and Stripes Forever, and the parade began its march through town. As they passed the reviewing stand, Cal spotted his family. Elena was helping Tomas wave a small flag, while Marisol and Rosie cheered. The sight made his heart swell. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely widower focusing only on survival. Now he had more family than he'd ever dreamed possible. The parade route ended back at the park, where Mayor Thompson stood at the podium, ready to begin the day's ceremonies. "Before we start the official proceedings," she announced, "we have a special presentation. Would Cal Whittaker and his family please come forward?" Cal felt Elena's hand slip into his as they walked to the front. Rosie and Marisol followed, with Tomas holding tight to both their hands. "Many of you know the story of how love and truth prevailed in our town," the mayor continued. Today, we're proud to officially welcome the newest business to Willow Creek's Main Street. She gestured to where a large banner hung, covered by a sheet. 2 young veterans, Cal's first apprentices, pulled the cord. The sheet fell away, revealing the sign, Whitaker, Friends Veteran Garage, where service continues. The crowd erupted in applause. "Speech!" someone called out. Others took up the cry. Cal shook his head, but Elena squeezed his hand. "Just speak from your heart," she whispered. He cleared his throat. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "But I know about service. In the Army, we learned that no one succeeds alone. This town, all of you, you've shown what it means to be a true community. This garage isn't just about fixing cars. It's about fixing lives, one person at a time." More applause followed. As people began dispersing toward the food tables and games, Tomas tugged at Cal's sleeve. "I made something for you," he said shyly, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. The card was decorated with crayon drawings, stick figures of their whole family standing in front of what was clearly meant to be the garage. But it was the words inside that made Cal's vision blur. "Daddy, thank you for fixing more than cars." The first firework burst over the Willow Creek River, sending cascades of gold sparks across the inky summer sky. Cal Whitaker stood at the riverbank, Elena's hand warm in his, watching the colors reflect in her dark eyes. The humid July evening wrapped around them like a blanket, carrying the lingering sense of barbecue smoke and watermelon from the town picnic. "Beautiful," Elena whispered, squeezing his hand. She wore a simple white sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking nothing like the billionaire the papers loved to scrutinize. Here, she was just Elena, the woman who had changed his life in ways he never expected. Behind them, blankets dotted the grassy slope where families sprawled to watch the show. Rosie sat with Tomas nearby, both children clutching sparklers that painted light trails through the darkness. The 6-year-old boy's laughter carried over the crowd's murmur, pure joy that made Cal's heart swell. Another burst of color lit up the sky. Red and blue stars that crackled and faded. Cal felt the familiar tightness in his chest ease as he watched Elena's profile, illuminated by each flash. The PTSD that had haunted him since his Army days seemed lighter now, manageable in ways it hadn't been before she came into his life. "Quite a different 4th than last year," Duke commented, ambling over with 2 paper cups of lemonade. His gruff voice carried its usual hint of humor. "Last time I checked, you were elbow deep in Mrs. Peterson's transmission, refusing to join the festivities." Cal accepted the drink with a grateful nod. "Some changes are worth making." "Speaking of changes," Duke continued, his eyes twinkling, "when you 2 finally make it official, my diner's catering. No arguments. Already got a special menu planned, though Elena might want something fancier than my famous meatloaf." Elena laughed, the sound carrying over another thunderous boom overhead. "Duke, your meatloaf is exactly what I want. Simple, honest, and from the heart. Just like this town." Pastor May approached, her silver hair glowing in the fireworks light. She carried herself with that familiar quiet dignity, though tonight there was an extra spring in her step. "Room for one more?" she asked, joining their small group. "Always," Cal replied, making space in their circle. The pastor's eyes held knowing warmth as she looked between Cal and Elena. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said softly. "Sometimes he sends storms to lead us exactly where we need to be." Cal thought back to that rainy night when he'd first stopped to help Elena with her flat tire. How different would their lives be if he'd driven past? If he hadn't stood up to those men who'd hurled slurs at her? One small choice had changed everything. "Daddy," Tomas called out, running over with his sparkler held high. "Look what Rosie showed me." He traced a heart in the air, golden sparks trailing behind the motion. Cal caught Elena's eye, seeing tears shimmer there. The word daddy no longer carried the weight of scandal or confusion. Now, it was simply truth, spoken with a child's pure love. Rosie followed close behind, her own sparkler drawing patterns that mirrored her brother's. The next explosion of fireworks painted the sky in a cascade of silver and gold, like a curtain of stars falling to earth. Cal felt the weight of the ring in his pocket, the one he'd carried since that morning, waiting for this perfect moment. "Pastor May," he said quietly, "would you mind saying a blessing?" The older woman's face broke into a wide smile. I thought you'd never ask. Duke quickly gathered nearby townspeople, forming a loose circle around them. Rosie's eyes went wide as she realized what was happening, and she grabbed Tomas's hand, both children vibrating with excitement. Cal turned to face Elena fully, taking both her hands in his. The fireworks continued overhead, but he barely noticed them now. All he could see was her face, the face of the woman who had helped him believe in second chances. Pastor May raised her hands. "Dear Lord," she began, her voice carrying clearly despite the pyrotechnics, "we gather here to witness love bloom anew. You bring healing through unexpected means, hope through storms, and family through faith. Bless this union, born of service and strengthened by trial. May Cal and Elena's love continue to inspire our community and remind us that your grace makes all things new. Amen," the gathered crowd echoed. Duke wiped his eyes with his sleeve, trying to play it off as smoke from the fireworks. "Well," he prodded gruffly, "get on with it, Whitaker. Some of us want to get back to our hot dogs." Laughter rippled through the group as Cal reached into his pocket. The simple gold band caught the light of another brilliant burst overhead as he held it up. He'd practiced words all week, but now, looking into Elena's eyes, he knew he only needed the truth. "Elena," he said, his voice steady despite his pounding heart, "you came to Willow Creek looking for reality, and you found a home. I was a broken man trying to fix everyone else, and you helped me heal myself. Will you marry me?" Elena's smile outshone the fireworks. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." As Cal slipped the ring onto her finger, Rosie and Tomas erupted in cheers, their voices joining the explosion of color and light overhead. The crowd broke into applause, and Duke shouted something about breaking out his special recipe book. Elena leaned in close, her words for Cal alone. "I came looking for truth about how my money helped people," she murmured. "Instead, I found a man who showed me what real wealth looks like: family, community, and love that asks nothing in return." The fireworks reached their finale, filling the sky with brilliant bursts of red, white, and blue. But Cal and Elena only had eyes for each other, their joined hands promising a future neither had dared to dream of before that stormy night on a county road. The explosions of color painted Elena's joyful tears with rainbow hues as Rosie and Tomas rushed in for a family hug. Pastor May's blessing hung in the air like a promise, while Duke already began listing potential wedding menu items to anyone who would listen. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Cal Whitaker, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.